Hi, I'm Symone Harms with Upper Midwest Law Center, and I'm thrilled to dive into today's episode. This topic specifically I enjoy because I'm a college student myself. We are talking about a lawsuit against St. Cloud University, where students are required to pay fees that fund political advocacy when they might not even support it or know what it's about. So I'd personally be pretty upset if I found out my tuition was going towards pushing views that I don't agree with. So I'm excited to dive in today. I'm joined here with James and Allie. If you two could just introduce yourselves for the audience, that'd be great.
Thanks, Simone. I'm James Dickey. I am the managing attorney at the Upper Midwest Law Center and glad to be with you to talk about this important case.
Thank you for having us. I'm Allie Howell, a trial and appellate counsel with the Upper Midwest Law Center.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Like I said earlier, we're unpacking a case that challenges St. Cloud University's mandatory student fees, which fund political advocacy group called Students United. And this raises big questions amongst people about free speech, compelled speech, and what it means to be automatically enrolled in an organization as a student. So, first, I'd like to ask you guys the question: can you redefine the meaning of free speech in the context of mandatory fees at public universities?
Well, I'll jump in on this first one, and Allie, you can add your 2 cents, but I think it's pretty straightforward. You can be required as a student at a university like St. Cloud State or any Minnesota State College University, to pay a fee that goes to fund a number of different programs of all different kinds of viewpoints. What you cannot be required to do, and what is happening under not just St. Cloud State's policy, but a statewide policy created by the Board of Trustees of the state university system, is to be forced to fund one organization's personal viewpoints, essentially, because they are advocating, they're supposed to advocate on behalf of all students. They claim to do so, but they advocate in ways that clearly are objectionable to a large number of students. You can't be forced to have money paid to the university as a condition of enrollment to fund advocacy that you just disagree with.
Yeah, that's a great answer. How would you say, Allie, how does forcing a student to fund political speech violate the First Amendment's protection against compelled speech?
Well, I think there's really there's kind of two prongs to this, in that there's the First Amendment protects against compelled speech, as you just said, and so going way back to the founding, our founding fathers really stated that there's a great evil in forcing someone to, I think the direct quote is, to mouth words that they find objectionable. And I think I maybe messed up the quote a little bit, but that is like from Thomas Jefferson, and that's really a founding principle of our country, that you can't be required as a condition of employment for a state entity, or for just existing and choosing to go to school, a certain public university in Minnesota, to basically be taking your money to go towards someone else's speech that you may disagree with. And the second part is there's also the First Amendment also protects against compelled association, and protects your rights to associate with groups and organizations that you agree with. And so being forced to be a member of an organization that advocates for principles that you disagree with is also directly opposed to the protections of the First Amendment, and something that shouldn't be required for students just basically by enrolling in the college in the state anyway.
Yeah, and that honestly goes right into my next question. So, James, I'd love to have you answer this one. Does this case challenge just the funding of speech, or also the idea that students are automatically enrolled in an organization without their consent?
Yeah, it's the latter. It's both. But exactly as Allie said it, you can't be both forced to say something that you disagree with by the government as a condition, to get the access to the universities that everybody else has access to. And you also can't be forced to be a member. I mean, it's like saying that you're going to tell Jewish students that they have to be, members of the Hamas pre-Palestine organization or something like that. It's as the quote Allie was getting at was Jefferson's quote, and he called that practice sinful and tyrannical. And the U.S. Supreme Court has directly quoted Jefferson on that point in the Janus case from 2018. So it's just wrong.
Yeah. Could you guys talk just a little bit about Taya Lackey? And she didn't even find out about some of this stuff until near graduation.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about what's really unique about her situation is so Students United, the organization that she was forced to fund and be a member of as a condition for her enrollment at St. Cloud State, has done a lot of advocacy for the abolition of student debt. Specifically, they had a website that was F Student Debt. I'll let you fill in the rest of that. And so they've gone after this in a really vulgar and um, kind of punchy way using student funds as their primary source of funding. And our plaintiff in the case, she got herself through college without taking on any student debt. She worked her way through, she paid her own way, and really she did everything right. And at the same time, her money, hard-earned money that she worked for to pay for college, was being used to advocate, really without her permission, for the abolition of other students' debt, something that she disagrees with. And so that's really her one of her objections to the forcing of the funding, of her being forced to fund Students United, and really really highlights the problem here that when you take students' money and you force them to give it to an advocacy organization that they don't really have a say in or are never even told about or have sort of a meaningful opportunity to object to, that their money can be used directly in causes that they disagree with.
Yeah. Some people, they argue that student fees are just a part of the college experience, even if they are going towards organizations that students disagree with or aren't even aware of. So, how would you respond to these people that think that they are just a part of the student experience?
Yeah, I think that, as I said right off the bat here, you can be forced to fund a campus fee, right? So that you can all attend athletic events. That was for me. That was what happened in college. It was great to be able to attend all the different sports teams. You can be forced to have a fee that goes towards all different clubs, Republicans, Democrats, student clubs, things like that. Those are viewpoint neutral fees. That is not what we're challenging in this case. So those criticisms are really just missing the point. You certainly can be forced to fund those things under the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in the Southworth case. And whether that was right or wrong, again, we're not directly challenging those kinds of viewpoint neutral subsidies here. What you can't do is require, like the example I gave before, you can't require a Jewish student who considers themselves a Zionist to fund, organizations like Students for a Free Palestine that are going to go and, basically create a hostile educational environment for Jewish students to be at, like in Columbia University, we've seen in other places around the country. That's what you can't be forced to fund, that one organization's viewpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just, I guess, maybe add to that, I was in college not that long ago and in school, so I was familiar with the student activity fees, what they call it, and all that money from students goes into kind of a pot, and call it the viewpoint neutrality pot, and that money gets divvied out to different groups. And so some of my money went into that pot, and it may have gone to groups that I disagreed with, but all these different student groups with different viewpoints had an equal opportunity to have access to that funding. What's happening in Minnesota state schools, including St. Cloud State, is that there's an entirely separate pot of money that's only for Students United, and every student is forced to pay into it. And that's really what's objectionable here, because groups or students with different viewpoints are not having any access to that funding source at all.
If Students United's advocacy is said to benefit students, how do you two specifically justify charging individual students like Lackey who feel harmed by that same advocacy?
Well, if I take the question as I understand it, the way they can fix the problem here is they can approach every student at each campus and they can say, hey, do you want to be a member? It's a very small fee per semester. This is what we're going to do with your money. And they can persuade you to become a member and they can collect from you directly instead of going through your tuition bill and making it a condition of enrollment. So there are less restrictive ways that respect the individual autonomy of students that organizations like Students United can employ to get people to join their organization. So there's ways that this can be done to have a student advocacy organization like this that don't interfere with students' rights. But the state of Minnesota and the Board of Trustees and the Chancellor and the university have all decided to go the unconstitutional way. And that's why we stepped in.
Yes. And just my final question for you two is kind of more on a personal note. if you were in Taya Lackey's position, finding out your tuition was funding political advocacy and you didn't support it or you didn't even know about it, how would you feel about this and what would you do?
Well, I like to think I would do exactly what Taya Lackey has done in this case and stand up for it. It's unconstitutional in all 50 states, no matter where you went to college. And then there's been similar cases in other states as well, dating back really decades that this has been, there's precedent that colleges can't do this and states can't set up a system that enables this either. And so I think she's on solid ground to stand up for this and has really done a brave and important act by stepping up and saying that this is not right and this violates the First Amendment and is hoping to remedy this situation, both for what happened to herself, but also to stop it from happening to other students that are still enrolled or may enroll in the future.
And let me just
Well,
add one last
yeah.
bit to that, which is that, there's a lot of students who just don't know about this. And if they look at their tuition bill, they'll see that there's a separate fee for Students United on there. And it's kind of insidious, right? You have it kind of hidden on there. It's there, but it's not really clear what it's for. Most people who look at it would say, oh, it's just a student fee like we've been talking about. But I think there's a lot of other students out there who are just like Taya Lackey, who if they knew about it, if it was more clear what they were funding, that they would also stand up and do the same thing. So we celebrate Taya's bravery in taking on this issue in this case. But we know there's a lot of people that she speaks on behalf of as well.
Well, I just appreciate all that you guys have done with this case and you guys standing up too. So thank you so much for your hard work and thanks so much for joining me on today's podcast too.
Thank you, Symone.
Thank you.
This is Symone Harms with Upper Midwest Law Center. Great.